You're kidding me, right? More price increases for Xbox? Even for developers, things are about to get more expensive. Now, for those who haven't kept up, some of the recent price increases we've seen include Xbox consoles having their prices increased not only once, but twice. And then we got the Xbox Game Pass price increase anywhere from 50% to 100%, depending on the region. In the US, from $20 to $30 a month, or $360 a year, which just at that point, you might as well just buy games outright instead of engaging with a subscription where you don't get to keep your games. There was the attempt to price certain games at $80. They backpedaled with Outer Worlds 2, but I'm pretty sure they do want to price their first-party games at $80 eventually down the line. The ROG Xbox Ally X being $1,000, and while there are people out there who are enjoying the device, it is a hefty price point to get into that part of the Xbox ecosystem. There's the removal of Game Pass discounts for DLC, and then there's Xbox Cloud Gaming and how they want to introduce a version that has ads in it that's going to limit you to 1 hour per session and 5 sessions per month. And all of that paired with, the lack of exclusives going forward, Xbox essentially going third party, all of the mass layoffs, the studio shutdowns, the mishandling of IPs, project cancellations, and many business decisions that go counter to what Xbox promised when they made all of the, recent major acquisitions, or when Phil Spencer took over. Just they've made so many promises that they have completely swerved from, that the Xbox brand and image and faith in it has been completely shattered. Gaming has gotten significantly more expensive across the board, with both Nintendo and PlayStation also increasing prices, but with Xbox, it feels like it's on a whole other level. And then the way Xbox is just handling the Xbox strategy as a whole has been a big miss, in my opinion. And now developers, based on this latest development, will also be suffering the brunt of a more expensive ecosystem, as The Verge reports right here that even Xbox developer kits are getting a big price hike. This all comes from sources that The Verge reached out to and collaborated with, and it is a pretty significant price increase. So before, Xbox development kits cost $1,500. Now they're about to cost $2,000, a 33% jump in price. The Verge managed to obtain a transcript of the announcement that Microsoft sent out to Xbox developers, and Microsoft basically gave the same excuse that they gave to customers and consumers when they raised prices for Xbox hardware, stating, quote, "The adjustment reflects macroeconomic developments. We remain committed to providing high-quality tools and support for your development efforts." You can see right here in their September 19th, 2025 announcement of Series S and Series X consoles seeing a second price increase that they use the same reasoning of changes in the macroeconomic environment, which of course is referring to the US tariffs that has shaken up the world economy. A lot of the manufacturing for Xbox happens in China, and there's currently a 30% tariff in China, and that actually aligns with the price increases we have seen for Xbox Series consoles. Right here we have a chart that Derek Strickland posted that has old prices, the first price increase, and the second price increase. And from launch MSRP to second price increase, you can see across the board, Xbox Series S's and X's have seen a price increase of roughly in the region of 30%, 33%, 29%, 30%, you name it, which goes in line with a 33% price increase of Xbox development kits from $1,500 to $2,000. Similar to how Xbox Series S's have gone from $300 to $400, or Xbox Series X's here have gone from $500 to $600, or the 2 terabyte edition has gone from $600 to $730. I don't know, I guess I figured that given that Xbox development kits aren't sold en masse like the consumer version of the console are, that they'd be okay with absorbing some of the costs to ensure that developers get the best price possible. But I guess they want to increase prices across the board. Now, for major AAA publishers, for those who want to develop games on Xbox, this price increase ultimately won't impact their bottom line too much, given that they're, multi-million, multi-billion-dollar corporations. But say you're an indie developer where every dollar really matters. And you're finding out that you have to pay an additional $500 if you want to develop games on Xbox, which is already a platform that, in the perception of the gaming community, feels like it's dying off when it comes to that like first-party console development and first-party game development with exclusives for the first-party console. That's an area where it feels like Xbox is exiting. And for them now, it's all about the "this is an Xbox" marketing campaign, which suggests that any device that you own is an Xbox because you can play Xbox games on PC, on competing platforms via the cloud, on numerous devices like your phones and laptops and tablets, you name it. They're even partnering with smart TVs to ensure you can play your Xbox games in as much of a frictionless format as possible. But as far as the Xbox first-party hardware is concerned, the Xbox Series consoles, that feels like hardware that's dying off in terms of its viability. It's just not selling as well, like nowhere close to what Nintendo and PlayStation are selling when it comes to, like Nintendo Switch and Switch 2 or PlayStation 5. So the lack of a significant audience base compared to competing platforms is already a detracting reason for indie developers to invest too much in Xbox versions of their games. But now development kits costing that much more, 33% price hike, especially for indie devs for whom a couple $100 is actually a significant sum of money. That's only going to disincentivize, especially those indie developers, even further when there's already enough reasons to kind of steer away from developing your games for the Xbox Series console specifically. Now, it is worth highlighting that there is more to the Xbox Series development kit environment than meets the eye. Something that Rally Car Delta Gaming here conveyed is that there are some options for indie developers that don't involve having to pay $2,000 for one of these huge development kits, saying, quote, "What this report," referring to Tom Warren's report from The Verge, "does not consider, as of today, the ID at Xbox program will deliver an Xbox Series dev kit free of charge. Developers who do not need extra processing headroom can use their local Xbox Series console as a dev kit. The game developer kit is free of charge on GitHub and officially supported by Microsoft. A developer can start on the game developer kit without even applying for ID at Xbox or spending any money up front." And just so we're clear, dev kits used to be absurdly expensive back in previous generations. So there's some elements that help mitigate this price increase, especially if your game is small enough in terms of processing power that it doesn't require a full dev kit and you can use just your Xbox Series console and convert it into a dev kit. And if it is true that you get at least one free Xbox Series dev kit free of charge, then that does help to some degree. But keep in mind that when it comes to indie developers, there is a wide spectrum. Some of them are making, those smaller games that only take 1 to 2 developers. And then there are those indie developers who aim pretty high with their ambition and who do make games that require more processing power and that do require the actual proper dev kit with more processing headroom. For those who don't know, dev kits are superpower versions of the actual console because it just creates an environment where developers can do things like build and test Xbox games. So for example, a dev kit comes with 40 gigabytes of GDDR6 memory, whereas the Xbox Series X console proper, sold to consumers, comes with 16. That's on top of just general more computing units and various tools for debugging, so on and so forth, as well as a front panel and programmable buttons and just features that make game development processes much better and much easier. So while not all indie games might require a full-on dev kit, there will be a lot of indie devs who will want these proper dev kits to ensure they have the best development environment. And for those devs who are financially more strapped because they're still up and coming and who might require multiple dev kits, you name it, these price increases could be detrimental enough. It won't be the thing that tanks their development for Xbox consoles, but it might be another reason to not develop for Xbox. There are already plenty of scenarios where developers have opted to not launch their games on Xbox because it's just not financially worth it due to its lower audience base and player base. So yeah, all of this is worth keeping in mind. There is some leeway here and there, but given all of the price increases we've already seen recently, it just doesn't help to see yet another price increase in another sector of Xbox when already it feels like this platform is the most expensive. Now, what is unique about this particular instance is that unlike the price increases for the Xbox Series consoles for consumers, which only happened for the United States due to its particular tariffs, when it comes to the development kit price increases, that is not just something that's impacting US developers, it's happening across Europe and elsewhere as well. And The Verge cites how those macroeconomic conditions extend beyond just US tariffs, with currency fluctuations, production costs, and other elements impacting pricing. But yeah, such a huge price hike being reflected across the board and not just the US where the tariffs are taking place. It just feels unnecessary. But I guess Microsoft just wants to even out the playing field for development kits across the board for all regions, for all developers, no matter what. But regardless, the overall optics of this is not very good, given everything that has happened before, given all of the price increases across not just Xbox hardware, but also Xbox software, including digital areas where tariffs shouldn't impact that stuff. There's no tariff on subscription models like Game Pass, and yet Game Pass went up in price by 50% here in the US and 100% in regions like Brazil. Digital games are trying to raise prices from $70 to $80 since Nintendo pulling that off with Mario Kart World successfully has basically normalized that and given other publishers and developers the confidence to follow suit and price their games at $8 as well. Since one major company has already done it and has done so successfully, consumers have already been so severely impacted, and now to see developers be impacted as well, I mean, that's just kind of the turd on top of a shit cake. Now, it seems as though Microsoft is trying to mitigate some of the additional manufacturing costs as a result of US tariffs by trying to move production away from China. As Windows Central reports right here, as trade tensions heat up between the US and China, Microsoft is reportedly shifting Surface production overseas and encouraging Xbox manufacturing abroad in a move that could reshape its hardware future. Maybe they'll find a region where tariffs aren't as high and they're able to more reliably trust that manufacturing costs can be kept lower. And if that were to happen, I'm curious if Microsoft and Xbox would be willing to decrease those prices once more, or if they're just going to keep them the same, since that has kind of become the normal price point. And with development kits in particular, I'm wondering if they're going to maintain that $2,000 price point, or if they do manage to successfully move manufacturing to somewhere where manufacturing is cheaper and where it isn't as severely impacted by US tariffs, if they would be willing to decrease those prices and garner some kind of goodwill, because the goodwill surrounding Xbox is fading very quickly. Xbox is in a position right now where they're already in last place in this race, right? While at the same time, there's nothing that's giving them a speed boost to allow them to catch up. Everything they're doing, if anything, is the complete opposite. They're giving themselves obstacles, whether it's the confusion surrounding what Xbox is as a brand anymore, since they're trying to diversify Xbox where it's not just about consoles and exclusives, and they're not going for the traditional model. They're trying to make it seem like every device you own is an Xbox. And so what that really means is Xbox is going third-party developer. But one of the most important factors, price, is an area where Microsoft simply cannot compete. The value of an Xbox compared to the value of a PlayStation 5 or a Nintendo Switch 2, I mean, there's a huge gap there. If you're last place in a race, you gotta give yourself some kind of advantage, even if it means short-term losses. And that includes giving your platforms compelling games and products that you can't get anywhere else, and also ensuring that prices are competitive. If you're last place in a race and you're also the most expensive platform to get into, then, I mean, you're only going to fall further behind. There's no chance for you to be in the competition. If the Xbox Game Pass proposition was more compelling, then maybe I'd be more open to the idea of Microsoft and Xbox exiting the hardware race and making Game Pass their flagship platform and service. But even Game Pass's value, now I can no longer say it really is the best value in gaming. At $360 a year, I just cannot justify making that your primary platform instead of just buying games outright, whether it's AAA games or, AAA games that have gone on sale, or games that are sold for cheaper, especially where indie titles are concerned. Whether it's $20 for Silksong or $50 for Expedition 33, you might as well just spend the $360 a year budget that you would allocate to Game Pass on purchasing those kinds of games and keeping them permanently without any caveats. So it's already hard for consumers to justify being a part of the Xbox platform and committing to it over your other platforms like Nintendo and PlayStation. Not all consumers can afford to be a part of all three, right? They have to make a choice. And Xbox just is clearly right now the least compelling choice. But now developers, especially those who have a very limited budget and needing to make decisions as to how to allocate that money, now there's even more friction when it comes to developing games for Xbox, which means that there'll be less incentive to make games for Xbox, and with less games on Xbox as a potential result of this price increase and the impact that has on especially smaller developers, the gap between the more successful platforms and consoles like the Nintendo Switch and PlayStation 5 and the less successful ones like Xbox is only going to get that much wider. With Xbox right now, it feels like it's going to be death by 1,000 cuts, or I should say death by a dozen gaping wounds. What this all culminates in is Xbox being the platform with, I think, the worst optics out of the main three, and them not being in a position where they can make a comeback and start to genuinely compete on a serious level with Nintendo and PlayStation, who have been really thriving in the console market space. But I suppose only time will tell how all of this will pan out and how this will end up impacting developers from various walks of life. Again, I predict that the biggest publishers and developers won't be too impacted by this, but for smaller indie devs in particular, this just might be an excuse to not make their games on Xbox and just keep to the platforms that people are most playing and that are maybe less expensive to develop for, that have a higher chance of yielding returns. It's just a much better gamble to invest in the other platforms currently. But that's my take. I'd love to hear your take on all of this in the comments below. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.